Which players are on the 53-man roster bubble here for you guys? We want to know. I mean, we saw Xavier Smith, as you talked about earlier, Gilbert. What does that do for Tutu Atwell? Why is he sitting? Why, when you have guys like Xavier Smith, is he going to make it tougher for someone like Tutu Atwell where you can move on from him, Gilbert? Other guys like Jay Hummel, we talked about, Ernest Jones, and we're like, well, what's behind him? We started to see Jake Hummel. He's a special teams guy, but he's performed really well in these games. And same thing with the center. We were asking, well, who's behind Steve Avila? If one of those three guys in the interior has to miss time, who can come in? We've seen Logan Bruss. I mean, a guy who got cut
Yeah.
last year, Gilbert. He's made such a big impression now that he's gonna. I think he makes this team, but without the preseason, we don't get to see these kind of guys. So I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
we spotlighted some names here.
Well, the good thing is that a guy like Jordan Whittington stepping up for 2 games down the preseason, you're starting to you feel sure about him, or okay, you got your big three in Robinson and Puka and Cooper, but if injury occurs, you can have him to be the fourth guy. Now it's kind of like, okay, how much depth do you really need? And also, are you ready to give up on a guy like Tutu Atwell? Maybe you want to give a chance to some of these younger guys like Xavier Smith, or I think he has a good name for LA, JJ Lap, because it's spelled LAAP.
Yeah.
LA. Maybe it's meant to be in LA, but yeah, these are moments where you step up and you get them in the second preseason game or in the third preseason game. And when you make lasting impressions like that, where you get a touchdown or you just make pivotal plays, you're gonna find the spot. So, with Tutu Atwell, he's had a lot of opportunities. So it's tough because he's viewed as a veteran. So you think maybe he doesn't need to show anything to McVay, but then you think about his history where he's had a lot of up and downs where maybe he does need to show something to McVay. So if he's not playing, sometimes it means that's good for a veteran, but it could be like, hey, you know what? We're starting to phase you out. We don't really feel you right now. Let's see what these other young guys could do. So that's the thing, is a mystery there. But I think Jordan Whittington stepping up could spell trouble for Tutu Atwell. And like you mentioned, Victor, like Logan Bruss found himself on waivers, came back and did it the hard way. And now he's making a name for himself, or at least he's providing help where help is needed. So that's the other part of it too. The equation is like, if you feel confident with your big four wide receiver, now you're thinking like, hey, we could use an extra body on offensive line. We could use an extra body on linebacker. And that's where also more trouble could come to Atwell. I think he's had his opportunities. I think maybe it's time to move on, or at least cut him, and then maybe run, see if anybody else wants him. If not, bring him back, and you kind of do that again with the practice squad kind of thing there. But you heard the broadcast saying, hey, you want these guys to step up on defense because you have some question marks at linebacker. You do need some depth at secondary. So games like this where a lot of starters are not playing, you see guys stepping up, that's good. And going off of James Wheelock's comment, having young talent is a good thing because you need depth in the NFL.
Yeah, you really do, especially when, as we talked about, you're trying to replenish a Super Bowl team, especially after, you had a bad season 2 years ago. You come back and you make the playoffs last season. And so you have the retirement of Aaron Donald. You have guys who are a little bit older. So you're having to hit, which they've done a great job of hitting on guys in the middle rounds. And now you continue to see it with guys like we talked about, Xavier Smith, and Beaux Limmer and Logan Bruss coming back, and even like a Jaylen McCollough, like with that nice interception in the first half. But it kind of, one of the things I was kind of wanting to talk to you about for this episode with the Rams roster and this 53-man roster, which guys are on the bubble, it's going to be kind of hard to figure out. Just and going to what Stevon is saying here, he says, kind of feel like we're going to lose Xavier Smith if he doesn't make the 53-man roster. Tutu is currently in stretch as a number 4, I think. So I mean, there's
Or
a
I think
lot
it'll
there.
be
You
number
also have,
five. I think it'll be number five, I guess, if you're thinking about Jordan Whittington.
yeah. And then you also have Tyler Johnson. I mean, and
Yeah.
also, what do you need? Do you need someone who can do special teams? Like, and it makes the decisions harder too when you have a guy who can return punts and kickoffs, like Xavier Smith. So that'll be a big question mark when we have our 53 man roster
Yeah.
episode. Is how many receivers do you keep? Where how many secondary guys? Because we don't know when Williams is going to be back. We've been told that he'll be ready to go for week one, but you have guys who've been hurt in the past. Do you want to make sure that you have guys behind them? It's going to be a tough, uh, cut, for the cutting down the 53 man roster for the Rams.
Yeah, I would not be shocked if they go with 5 wide receivers. I think 4 would be a little. I guess you're really hoping a lot of things go right for your big three there, in the Marcus Robinson, Puka, and Cooper. You've already seen an injury to Puka Nakua, so I think 5 sounds like the magic number, and I think it sounds like Steve is high on Tutu still. So that could be something where you're thinking like, well, you don't want to lose Xavier Smith, and maybe the odds are that he probably will go through waivers and you're going to pick him up. But hey, maybe he has another week, another week 3 preseason performance where he balls out, and you don't want to risk that. So I think it's going to be 5 right there because of the injuries on the offensive line. Because maybe you need a little more depth in the secondary. You also have uncertainty at linebackers. So I see defense getting a lot of extra rosters and also offensive line where you probably are going to have to pick between Tutu, Tyler Johnson, Xavier Smith, or even JJ Lapp, who got a touchdown.
Yeah, and one I remember having this conversation 2 years ago when Lance McCutcheon came into play, and we were like, "Well, are they gonna do 7 receivers?" They ended up keeping 7 receivers. There's always that surprise cut. There's always that player that ends up making the roster, and then you have teams who cut other guys who the Rams might be looking at, and they bring those guys in as
Yeah.
well. That's another way of going. So it'll be interesting to see where they stand. I know in terms of the offensive line, Gilbert McClendon was a guy that's been talked about the last 2 weeks since the injuries happened to Havenstein, and so there's guys that are stepping up, and it's good to see because that's been my biggest question mark with this team was injuries and that offensive line, especially with the injuries. I wasn't as concerned because we liked where they were going in terms of how they were building the trenches. My biggest concern was now with the injuries, would they have guys step up? And so far we've seen that with some of the guys.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. It's kind of got me worried with all the injuries with the Rams, and I'll be full transparent here that it's time for me to make my final predictions for the season. SI is asking me to do it within a week, and I'm like, the Rams have lot of injuries. I don't like this dilemma with Matthew Stafford possibly on his final year, so you kind of worry about that. And then you see them kind of have all these diamonds in the rough or gems just stepping up, and like it just reminds you how well Les Snead and McVay draft and develop players and get them ready. Where last year nobody expected them to do anything, and then they ball out. But it's just you see all the injuries in the offensive line, and you see the contract dilemma with Stafford, or Stafford having the hamstring injury against the Cowboys. It does kind of worry you a little bit. You see him picking Quill again some injuries, but then games like today where like okay they tend to they just have a knack of finding gems. And we hadn't even talked about Joshua Carty, the rookie kicker that they drafted, and he's doing well. He's drilling field goals out there. And I think it was Andrew Siciliano on the broadcast that kept reminding people that the Rams at one point had Cameron Dicker, who I think has developed into one of the best kickers in the
Yeah.
NFL. Dicker the kicker. But it doesn't feel that bad, or there's no sting there because you're seeing Joshua Carty making the field goal. So another reminder that the Rams tend to find talent, develop them, and get them ready to go. Where guys like Aubrey Pleasant could look good on a preseason game. So it's a lot of kind of debating the injuries, and then also keeping in mind the history of what LSD does.